David Pyott turned eye care company Allergan into a Botox powerhouse and one of Wall Street's best performing stocks. Then he fought off a corporate raider and earned $500 million. Now he's fighting laws and fast buck artists that he says are killing jobs in medical research. David Pyott on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming. Hi, I'm Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. It seems no businesses are making more money these days or drawing more critics than pharmaceutical companies. They're mega-merging, cutting jobs, jacking up drug prices, and moving their headquarters out of the U.S. to avoid taxes. But still, many are doing research, innovating, coming up with medications and devices that help us live longer and better. So just what is going on? Who are the good guys, the bad guys? What's wrong? How do we fix it? Well, who better to talk about this and much more than my guest? Named last year by Harvard Business Review as the 4th best performing CEO in the world, and until recently, CEO of until recently Irvine-based Allergan, David Pyott. Welcome, Commander. And of course, the commander refers to your title as Commander of the British Empire, and we'll get into that in a moment. We'll also get into that dramatic takeover battle over Allergan, and its impact on Orange County, both pro and con. But first, let's take a look at the really big picture. And of course, now the company, the successor to Allergan, is merging with Pfizer in one of the biggest mega mergers ever. Hillary Clinton and others have criticized it almost on both sides of the political aisle. People are finding fault with what's going on. It seems like so much of the pharmaceutical industry suddenly has gone from making medicine to making money. Help us make sense of it all.
Right. Well, of course, there's been waves of consolidation in many industries, and especially pharmaceuticals over the last 25, 30 years. I can remember there being really 100 fairly large companies, and now it's down to probably 20 using the same kind of yardsticks. Mm-hmm. So this is more of the same that has continued for a long time. Of course, in this marketplace where we have the Fed and the European Central Bank really creating very cheap money, that creates the right conditions for mergers and acquisitions, for some very large debt raises and so on. But as you said, of course, the really important thing is always to remind ourselves pharmaceuticals are there to improve and lengthen lives. And that's really what the industry is about and should be about.
But is that, so it seems like, and there's been many criticisms, and you've been a critic yourself of what's going on, that there's really, is it making better medicine to roll up these companies and, do the types of things? After all, Allergan, you fought that takeover. That was part of this, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, if you look at our track record, we kind of really stuck to our principles. And when I joined Allergan in the early days of '98, our research and development budget was about just under $100 million. And even under all the pressure that we faced in the huge battle of 2014, we still spent over $1 billion. It was almost right. $1.1 billion in R&D, and showed a lot for it. In fact, in the prior 4 years, we'd had no less than 12 approvals from the Food and Drug Administration for new medications. So really quite extraordinary.
Well, in fact, Allergan became a target because the corporate raiders said he was going to cut that. That was an unnecessary expense to be spending so much on research, and we'll get back to that. Right now, a big part of this Pfizer-Allergan merger is tax inversion. That's where the company moves out of the United States to get a lower tax rate. A lot of Americans don't like that. Is this good or bad?
Well, I'm really quite concerned for the future of the United States. You can see companies moving their domicile, which really means the legal place that you pay your principal taxes from the United States to Ireland is quite frequent, Switzerland sometimes, and then also laced in with tax entities based in Bermuda, Luxembourg, places like that, sometimes Singapore. But you can see it not just being a phenomenon of the pharmaceutical industry, you can see the same thing going on gradually in high tech. Another great name in Orange County is Broadcom. There, shortly in 2016, early 2016, Broadcom will become a Singapore-based company. Although analogous to our situation, the management will be sitting in Northern California.
Right.
Going back to Pfizer and Allergan, really when you step back, based on reports I've read, from both financial analysts as well as in what I'd call reputable financial press, the tax loss to the United States government will be about $2.5 billion per year. And of course, that's why you're getting reactions from whether it's presidential hopefuls, members of Congress. And I think when you step back, really, this government needs to change the tax system. We now have the highest tax rate in the world. Even Japan recently reduced their number to be just less than ours. A great example is the UK. I left there because I was quite frustrated some 30 years ago by the really uncompetitive situation. At that time, the UK tax rate was around about 30%. Today it's 18% and going down to 14% in the next couple of years. Contrast that to the United States, headline numbers about 35%.
About 35%. Tax. Although with write-offs and things like that, it gets down to like 24, 25%, but it's still higher than any other developed country. So as someone who's in the industry, and this is something that many of the Republican candidates have echoed, you've got to bring the tax rate down. The alternative is let's force them not to do the deal. Let's stop it. Is that feasible?
It's going to be very difficult for the government because on paper, the new Allergan, because for the viewers, it's very rare that a company, when it's acquired, ends up having the name that lasts because, of course, Actavis was the acquirer of Allergan. For the first couple of months, the company was called Actavis, then changed to Allergan. And on paper, here's Allergan buying Pfizer. The reason for that is Allergan today is an Irish-based company. And for the government to block it would be very difficult because this country has always been open for free and open competition. Foreign firms should be capable of buying American corporations in the same way that American corporations have built great businesses worldwide, including buying entities all over the globe.
Right. Okay. Another thing that people are concerned about is the high price of drugs. And what do you think about some companies that have decided we're going to buy somebody and then jack up the drug prices? Is that capitalism at work?
Well, I suppose so, although I really don't support it at all. I think one always needs to have a value-based proposition and always remind ourselves as pharmaceutical executives or former executives, our job is to help patients and then secondarily do the right thing for the investment community.
Who better to ask than you? I think a lot of people are wondering about this. Why do Americans pay more for drugs than folks in, let's say, Canada?
Well, the United States is one of the few places in the world where drug pricing is unregulated. So it's a free market. I think, though, for the viewers, it is also misleading to look at what I'll call list price. It'd be a bit like going into a hotel and saying, sure, it costs whatever, $350 rack rate, but who actually pays rack rate? There's always a discount. And that's the case with pharmaceuticals. So you have to be very careful.
But isn't that's a crazy system? Why? In most businesses, you know what the rate is.
Well, I mean, I think from my knowledge of being a consumer in the United States, there's deals for everything. It's not just on Black Friday. There's different traditions of discounting around the world. But I agree with you. Net, the United States normally does have the highest price in the world. And in other countries, whether it's Canada or the UK or France or Germany or Japan for that matter, they regulate the price because they are a huge purchaser of pharmaceuticals, being the Ministry of Health or the Social Security Administration. Of course, each country has their own system.
Now that the viewers have enjoyed 15 minutes or so of your beautiful Scottish accent, let's get a little more personal and let's take a look at a few pictures here that kind of show you and the kind of environment you operate in. So here you are with the Queen of England, so Queen Elizabeth. What's happening here?
Well, this was a wonderful experience where, by a miracle, I was actually in my office when the British consul in Los Angeles called me. And of course, he said, "I'm calling you on Her Majesty's service." And I said something fairly rude to him, like, "I sure hope so." And then he said, all jokes apart, he said, "I'm on some very official business." And I then sort of begot the inkling that there was something good coming. And I really thought I was going to get a much lower award. And in fact, the one I have, Commander of the British Empire, is a pretty cool title.
Yeah.
There's only about 7,000 people in the world have this title. It's literally limited, so somebody's got to do the honorable thing and kind of move on to the next world to create a slot.
Or they can get promoted tonight, right? That's the next step. So someday, presumably, if all goes well, you will be knighted. This is the first step. Right.
One would hope, but it would be cool. But I don't really have that as an expectation.
And you received that honor for what? For your
for services to really the British community and pharmaceutical research and development in the United States. And always there's a reason behind these titles for some good service. And of course, it's really cool that you get a choice. In my case, I could have gone to Edinburgh, to Holyrood Palace. And although I'm quite a passionate Scotsman, the idea of going to Buckingham Palace was irresistible. And you actually get to speak to the Queen, look her right in the eyes for about, must be about 100 seconds. And it seems to last a long time.
Wow.
She is very well prepared. And
do you remember what you talked about?
Yeah, the first thing she asked me about was, I understand that you're in the American, and then she pronounced it very English, the pharmaceutical industry. And I said, indeed, Your Majesty. And then afterwards, you're allowed to call her Mom. And she takes a great interest.
Mom or Mom?
Mom.
Mom.
Is Mom. So like M-A-M-M, right?
Oh, okay.
And you really have the feeling standing there that you're the only person on this planet, and she is concentrating on nobody else. She has an unbelievable means of doing this. And the memory, there's 100 people maybe in a ceremony. The equerry whispers a little bit in her ear to give her the prompt. And after that, she's off to the races.
She's had a lot of practice at it, right?
She's been doing this a long time, and she's really good at her job.
Yes. And of course, in the United States, we don't have royalty, but we do have presidents. And here you are flanked by two presidents. What was the nature of this picture?
Yeah, the occasion was the Biotechnology Industry Organization, which is an association of all the pharmaceutical biotech companies in the U.S. And we have every year a large industry meeting. A lot of people in the industry go, and frequently keynote speakers are former presidents. So, of course, I had a very pleasant experience. I'd met them before, but I'd never stood right between them. That was a really great and rare opportunity.
Have you met President Obama?
I haven't. I was working too hard the last few years.
What do you think of Obamacare or the healthcare reform?
Well, I think on a positive note, it is making care available to those who, very unusually for the world, for a wealthy country like the U.S. didn't have care, so that's really good. I think also the market is working, that the insurance companies are negotiating, as they should, good deals for their enrollees. And I think it's putting pressure on the pharmaceutical industry, but as you could tell, I was never apologetic. Even when I was CEO of Allergan in normal times, as an industry, you should be under pressure to be more productive and over time offer better value for money.
Okay. Let's move on to the big story, which was the Allergan Valiant takeover battle. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Allergan? You built it up over the years tremendously. I mean, the amount of increase in sales and stock value and everything, and it was the most valuable public company in Orange County. So let's go back to early last year. What was Allergan?
So really during my tenure, from early 98 until 2014, basically, we had some bumps along the way, of course, but on the big picture, enormous growth and success. When I joined, the sales were about 1.1 billion. That included AMO, which today is called Abbott Medical Optics, which we spun off into a separate company in 2001. So really my baseline was about 600 million if you take out the spin-off. And by 2013, we were already at 6 billion in sales, right. So 10x. And most of it was organic, really only one big acquisition in that period. Compound annual growth was about 16% in sales, probably closer to 20% on earnings per share. So things look pretty good.
And you had about 30,000 employees around the world?
No, many fewer. One of the great stories of efficiency was that when I started, including AMO, the employee count worldwide was about 6,400 people. And at the end of 13, it was 10,500 people. Okay. So obviously, you don't need a calculator to work out for 10x the sales. And it was really not just the Scottish captain, cracking the whip inordinately. So things look really good. And so it was surprising. And also in terms of market value, when I started, the company was worth just over $2 billion. And at the beginning of 2014, it was worth $37 billion.
Right.
So it seemed unlikely we were going to have any big problems. And frankly, I was looking forward to growing the company 10% plus per year for the subsequent 5 years.
So what happened?
So what happened was extremely unusual. First of all, we picked up some rumors that Valiant was interested in us. Frankly, I discounted them because Valiant already had junk-rated bonds. They just bought Bausch & Lomb, another famous American name in eye care, some 6 months earlier for almost $9 billion. And to buy us, even if they offered some stock, you knew that they had to raise an enormous amount of money. So when I spoke to the banking experts, I said, I don't get it, do you? And they shook their heads, said it seems almost impossible. So that's probably why they did this extremely never attempted combination where a strategic company like Valiant, domiciled in Canada, which we'll come back to, teamed up with an activist, Pershing Square, Bill Ackman here in Southern California. We know for his position in Herbalife, where he had a huge short on the stock. And, this is a guy that's very good in the media, public relations, and he is a
multi-billionaire.
Yeah, a very tough guy. Yeah. So they jumped me together, and we knew, the first we knew was in fact a call from a reporter asking us to comment on the Valiant bid, and we went, the what bid? And half an hour later, Bill Ackman was on CNBC in New York, and then we knew war had started.
One of the striking aspects of it was they made no secret of the fact that they were going to cut research and development. Allergan was a company that was spending too much money on frivolous research, if you will, and they were going to cut some 2,000 jobs or whatever. I mean, that's about the employment in Orange County where the researchers are. And, it almost became a battle of good versus evil, that you were the good company that was doing research and they were going to decimate it to make money. Is that, that's a nice spin. Is that the reality?
No, it's really repugnant from their public filings, because when you make these bids, you have to file everything you've said to the Stock Exchange Commission appropriately. Their plan, even at the very end, was to cut our overall operating expenditures. Just listen, 64%. Within that, R&D would have been cut almost 90%. So it would have gone from $1 billion down to roughly 200. It was really awful.
Wow.
So of course, the board and myself, we felt very, very uncomfortable about this. The job losses would have been horrendous. And but we're still a public company. And so, of course, we always had to direct our attention to how could we add enough value for our stockholders so that they would take our deal or another deal, but certainly not the Valiant deal.
Right, and we don't have time to get into all those details, but I think it is worth noting that your ability to fend off this takeover, to keep the stock going up, to do all those things will be a study in business schools, no doubt.
Already has been, in fact, London Business School, one of my alma maters, has already started working with the first case, and literally in the next couple of weeks, Harvard Business School will be teaching the Allergan case in Boston. So this is going down in the annals of business.
Of course, in order to do this, Allergan lost its independence. It was acquired by an Irish corporation, and there have been cuts in Orange County. So why, to what extent is Orange County better off having Allergan go down this path than if Valiant had won out?
Well, yeah, I referenced the Valiant plan to cut operating expenditure by 64%. When we got into serious discussions with activists and the CEO, it was very clear to me that it was much more in the norms of industry. When you put two companies together, the reduction was about 15%, and not just at Allergan, but on the legacy activist side as well. So very far cry from that.
So how many jobs do you think will remain at Allergan as a result of this arrangement in Orange County?
Right. So certainly speaking, of the situation up to the moment we passed ownership to activists, which is now called Allergan, it was about 1,500 jobs. That was also due to us taking a decision to outsource quite a lot of our clinical studies, whereas we've done a fair number internally. Now, of course, the Pfizer situation, that's a whole new ball game. I'm an outsider now. I'm not privy to any of the plans. I can just read the analyst reports, the financial press, just the same as you do.
Of course, as a result of this, you did very well. You wound up over the years with your stock options and everything, a little over $500 million. There are people out there that find that incomprehensible. So how do you, what do you say to that average person that says, gosh, you really did well?
Yeah, well, to the credit of the United States, there's no country on earth like this. So I'm enormously grateful that I had the opportunity both to come here, although it's now my third time living in the United States, but also, to really participate and to some degree create the American dream. And of course, as a context, when I started, the company was worth $2 billion. When we inked the deal with activists, the company was worth $66 billion. And because the market liked the prospects, and some of it was paid in stock, at date of close, ironic, it was St. Patrick's Day, we became Irish, it was $71 billion. So you have to see that gain in that context. And of course, obviously, as California residents, we all paid the highest tax in the union. And so
Jerry Brown thanks you.
I would hope so. We've been cutting some big checks, so of course 60% goes to tax.
And I don't think any Allergan shareholders begrudge you your payout. Let's talk. We're almost out of time. You are giving back. You've already given $6.5 million, I think, to the London School of Business.
London Business School.
The London Business School. What other things are you planning to do?
Well, the biggest thing I'm really, really passionate about is building an eye care hospital in Africa. And I'm one of the probably most knowledgeable people about eye care and ophthalmology worldwide, not just industrially, but I know the physicians of the world. I've traveled the world. And of course, there's no place more needy than Africa. And it's really a great feeling to know I can literally fund a complete hospital. Now, I'll probably bring in others because beyond a little bit of their money, I'd like their brains and I'd like their energy so that we have a consortium to make a tremendous difference.
Wow. And you're also, you're working on a book.
Yeah. Well, as you've realized in preparing for this interview, there are so many interesting angles to this. There's innovation, there's the future of the pharmaceutical industry, tax reform, patent reform. You can go on. And I was surprised when I did my homework that to be a New York Times bestseller, you only have to sell about 15,000 copies. So,
okay. Well, thank you, David. You're now a philanthropist and advocate, and thanks much for coming on and sharing your insights. Well, that's it for now. Thanks to my guest, Commander David Pyott. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.